is weird, but he disguises it under costume of phony compassion. A fake politician asks destructive ideas under the guise of empathy. At a 2017 town hall, he implied 10-year-old boys should be able to invade girls' bathrooms.
Tim Walz is now saying about Trump supporters, and forgive me, I'm just reading a quote from Tim Walz, "I think I could kick most of their ass."
Oh boy, he'd be in trouble.
Is there any way to know?
Well, he's a loser. You know, I guess a loser.
You think you know the story? Think again. Because this political meltdown took a sharp turn straight into Crazy Town, and it's messier than ever. Imagine Greg Gutfeld, the king of sarcasm, teaming up with Donald Trump, the maestro of mayhem. And their latest roast? None other than Minnesota's own governor, Tim Walz. Yeah, this combo lit Walz up like a 4th of July BBQ gone sideways. 1 minute, Walz is giving a routine speech. The next, he's scrambling, stuttering, dodging verbal grenades lobbed by Gutfeld and Trump like it's open mic night at Mar-a-Lago. The burns were brutal, the jokes sharper than a chef's knife, and the fallout? Oh, it's bigger than Minnesota's pothole problem, which, by the way, is still a disaster. So why is Minnesota suddenly trending for all the wrong reasons?
Walz, it's hard to even bring him up. He has a resting snitch face. You know? I mean, he forfeited his man card during COVID and the riot. And you're right. And also, at that diner, of course, he left early. So don't you find it weird for a terrifying threat to democracy that Trump is? Not a single interviewer in his history has approached him.
Well, it's a mix of scandal, absurd leadership, and one bizarre resume line that blew up the internet. Over the weekend, people started questioning Walz's military service. After it was revealed he once claimed to be an official bikini insert during his time in the National Guard. But his former superior wasn't buying it. He says Walz knew his unit was headed to Iraq and snuck out the back door to resign. When a reporter asked Walz for comment, he pointed somewhere off camera and literally said, "Hey, look over there," before running away. Not a joke. That actually happened. Even Trump couldn't resist the moment. He turned to the crowd, smirked, and said, "That guy? He's a sick puppy. I feel sorry for him. But if he was running in Pennsylvania, I still would have won easily. Susie would say, I would have won." You can't make this stuff up. They say leadership is about vision. But if that's the case, Tim Walz must have read television, because the only screen he's paying attention to is the one airing his next train wreck of a press conference, where he blames gravity, sunlight, and probably Greg Gutfeld for his latest screw-up. At this point, Walz is governing like he's playing The Sims with all the disasters turned on and no cheat codes. Fires, floods, riots. He's got them. Solutions? Not a chance. And let's talk policies. They're like potholes, deep, destructive, and placed exactly where you didn't want them. Gutfeld didn't hold back either. He said Walz has a resting snitch face and lost his man card somewhere between COVID lockdowns and riot evacuations. At that infamous diner visit? Yeah, he left early. Classic. But here's the real kicker. If Trump is such a terrifying threat to democracy, then why, after all this time, has not one journalist ever interviewed him like he's actually dangerous? Think about that. Meanwhile, Minnesota under Walz has become the political equivalent of a frozen casserole from 2020. Sitting in the back of the fridge, stale, sad, and possibly radioactive. But Walz, he keeps reheating it and serving it up with a side of new excuses. And this time, Trump and Gutfeld didn't just criticize him, they demolished him, with Trump bringing the wrecking ball and Gutfeld the snark of a raccoon on Red Bull. They tore into everything, from his bizarre executive orders to COVID overreach to, yes, his attempt to make it harder for women to vote. Wait, what? Trump signed an executive order making it more difficult for women to vote? That's what Walz claimed. But the second someone asked for specifics, the whole narrative collapsed. Because the most dangerous thing to a leftist politician is a follow-up question, which is why Gutfeld didn't even need prep. The content writes itself. This is the same guy who shut down an entire state so hard during the pandemic, even Wi-Fi signals had to quarantine. With all that power, you'd think he could fix something. Roads still look like the moon. Taxes? They're so high they need oxygen masks. Crime? Let's just say GTA looks safer than downtown Minneapolis. And then Walz has the nerve to complain about old white guys ruining the country? Bro, you're the old white guy, and honestly, you're proving your own point. He governs like a bootleg video game server, laggy, low-res, and always crashing. Say what you want about Trump, but at least the man does something. Even if that something is loud, chaotic, and typed entirely in caps lock. Tim Walz, on the other hand, he's the king of doing nothing, a substitute teacher running a state on autopilot, and every time someone questions his oddball decisions, he just gives that weird, confused smile like he walked into the wrong meeting. Before we dive deeper into the chaos, I want to hear from you. Is this peak political incompetence, or is there more behind the scenes we don't know? Drop your take in the comments, and if you're into raw political takedowns and unfiltered commentary, don't forget to subscribe to Cella Viral and turn on that bell. We've got way more coming, and trust me, you don't want to miss it. The man of the hour, Tim Walz, steps up again, delivering what might be the most awkward moment in political stagecraft. Picture this, a major public event, cameras flashing, applause rolling, and there he is, extending his hand to greet his wife of 30 years. A handshake, not a hug, not a warm embrace, a handshake. She grabs it. They shake. He pulls her in. Then what follows is something out of a human interaction error code, a no-friction hug, all while still shaking her hand. It's the kind of thing you'd only expect from a robot learning affection for the first time. And yes, there's a word for it. Weird. That one moment said more about Walz than an hour-long press conference ever could. The man babbles. He's got no grip on the room, no grip on his own narrative. Instead of leading, he's turned Minnesota schools into experimental think labs for political correctness, where math is optional, but knowing everyone's preferred pronouns is apparently crucial to graduation. The only thing rising faster than tuition is confusion. Exam scores, down. Clarity, non-existent. But hey, at least the feeling surveys are up. Meanwhile, Trump's just standing there, arms crossed, watching Walz stumble through statements like a dad trying to connect to the Wi-Fi router after 9 p.m. Gutfeld. He's having the time of his life, turning every one of Walz's stumbles into comedy gold. The guy doesn't even have to try. The punchlines write themselves. At one point, Walz was shouting about following the science like it was some sacred scroll. Remember when Democrats said men can have periods? Yeah, we all thought that was a stretch, until we met Tim Walz. Suddenly, it made a terrifying kind of sense. And then came the brilliant idea. Bars must close at 10 p.m. sharp, because apparently COVID turns into a vampire at 10:01, swooping into nightclubs the second the clock strikes. Genius-level strategy, really. Trump couldn't help himself. He compared it to Jasmine Crockett saying, "I gotta black this up." One of those moments that's so absurd it becomes legendary. And yet, through it all, Walz maintains a straight face, like a man who genuinely believes that no one has noticed the entire house is on fire. Every time someone asks about crime in Minneapolis, he starts babbling about community participation, like he's selling yoga classes to a SWAT team. You ask about gang violence, he offers mindfulness seminars. And speaking of law enforcement, remember when Minneapolis tried to rethink policing? That was Walz's moment to lead, to say, hold up, maybe don't dismantle the entire police department during a historic crime surge. But instead, he tap-danced around the issue like a nervous dad trying to avoid telling his toddler no. It was a disaster, pure and simple. At one point, after another horrifying incident in Minnesota, Trump was asked whether he'd spoken with the governor. His reply? I don't really call him. He's whacked out. Why would I call him? I could say hi. How you doing? But the guy doesn't have a clue. He's a mess. I could be nice and call him, but why waste the time? And just like that, Trump did what Trump does best. Cut straight through the spin. No fluff. No filters. Meanwhile, Walz tried to rally his base. We got into this mess, he said, because we weren't bold enough to stand up and say we're proud of these policies. Wait, what? You lost because you weren't woke enough? That's like telling Joy Behar she's not eating enough. It's like Jasmine Crockett saying she didn't black it up hard enough. The result of these policies? Absolute chaos, widespread confusion, a crime rate that could make Gotham City look like a gated community. Gutfeld's rants have practically become therapy sessions for frustrated Minnesotans. He's voicing what so many are already thinking. Our governor couldn't organize a sock drawer, let alone a functioning government. And Trump? Oh, he's loving every minute of it. He's pointing out every pothole, every ridiculous policy, and yes, even every awful haircut Walz has ever had. Because Tim Walz treats criticism like spam mail. He glances at it, deletes it, and then blames the sender. And just when you think he's done, he steps back into the spotlight like a failed sitcom character who doesn't know the show's been canceled. There he was at a Texas town hall with Beto O'Rourke, trying to channel some long-lost energy, some weird mix of motivational speaker and menstrual cycle advocate. Yes, that happened. At one point he said, "Our strength is our diversity," like it was a magical spell that fixes roads and balances budgets. You'd think with all this talk about boldness, he'd at least fix the infrastructure. But nope, his decisive action amounted to hiring consultants to make PowerPoint presentations on potholes. Seriously, and if you thought that was bad, wait until you hear about his attack on landlords. Rent control regulations that sounded great on Twitter, but played out like a real-time eviction of common sense. It was like watching a house of cards collapse while the builder insisted, "This is fine." So here we are, Minnesota under Walz. A handshake for a wife, a hug for wokeism, a PowerPoint for every pothole, and a press conference for every policy disaster. And through it all, Trump and Gutfeld sit back, laughing, roasting, and reminding us of one cold, undeniable truth. Tim Walz may be running a state, but he's doing it with the grace of a substitute teacher who lost the attendance sheet and can't find the whiteboard marker. And just like that, the housing crisis in Minnesota escalated from bad to absurd. Small landlords are tapping out, major ones are hiking rents, and the people stuck in the middle, renters, are left in limbo. And Tim's grand solution? A task force, which in political language is code for, let's hold endless meetings and define the word problem for the next 4 months. No action, just jargon. Meanwhile, Trump and Gutfeld watch the whole train wreck from afar, like spectators at a demolition derby, popcorn in hand, amused and horrified all at once. This is the same state that gave us Prince, Bob Dylan, and 10,000 beautiful lakes. Now, it's being run like a freshman dorm where the RA disappeared 3 semesters ago. Then there's the infamous quote from a Minnesota teacher that Walz proudly showcased. "As a teacher, my #1 responsibility in the classroom is the security and belongingness of every single child in that room." It sounds nice, warm, folksy, like it was plucked from a Hallmark card. But belongingness? Really? These are kids who can't do basic math, and instead of educational reform, we're giving them a therapy starter pack and a gender studies pamphlet. Gutfeld didn't miss a beat, calling Walz's leadership PowerPoint-based government that specializes in confusion. And honestly, he's not wrong. Let's talk transportation, because under Walz, it's an absolute circus. Projects are stalled, budgets are bloated, and timelines completely ignored. He pushed for light rail expansion, but forgot one key thing. Trains actually need to show up, and preferably on time. Even Trump's joke of a infrastructure week had more structure than this. And the man behind all this? Walz, same age as Trump, but you'd think he was a retired attorney moonlighting as a motivational speaker. Gutfeld nailed it again. He said Walz looks like the church guy who mysteriously remarries a week after his wife's disappearance. Or that classic high school football coach who says, grit 40 times but can't find the game plan. Honestly, the only thing moving under Walz's transportation department is the paperwork. Backward. If this comedy of governance continues, Tim Walz might just qualify for his own late-night special, Clueless in the Capitol. Picture it. No guests, no audience, no plan. Just one man alone with a mic and a pile of executive orders from 2019 he still hasn't read. It's tragic. It's hilarious. But above all, it's not leadership. And when you think it can't get any more bizarre, he drops another visionary idea. His climate plan? Basically a Pinterest board filled with half-baked slogans, paper straws, and solar panels that only work on Wednesdays. Meanwhile, rural Minnesotans are driving nearly an hour just to find a grocery store that hasn't been taxed into another dimension. Even Gutfeld laughed out loud. Walz somehow managed to turn one of America's most resource-rich, naturally blessed states into a parody of a failed group project. At this point, the state bird might as well be a tax auditor. Trump? He could barely contain his glee. Watching Walz fumble through speeches like a guy who just Googled, "What is GDP?" 5 minutes before going on stage. Every public address sounds like an A I trained on Pinterest quotes and cereal box slogans. No clarity, no urgency, just shuffled slides, fake smiles, and empty applause requests as the whole house burns behind him. And somehow, he still wants applause.